and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where, while some of you might be losing interest in the movies and shows that Hollywood produces, the drama behind the scenes continues to be one of the best shows in town. So Warner Brothers is continuing to dominate. What a turnaround, what a comeback! While Thunderbolts just isn't materializing, despite the best hopes of the studio and the fans who love the movie. What's going on there? We're going to discuss. Because, us gots to report the numbers, and the numbers are what they are. I was going to say the numbers don't lie, but the numbers can be massaged, but not by me. I always stare the numbers in the face. All right, so wow, how ironic that just as it seems Zazzy is getting ready to finally flip Warner Brothers, he might finally be getting the hang of being a studio head, right? Like, remember when he first came on, it was, it was reported that he was surprised that being the head of a studio wasn't as much fun as he'd hoped it would be. He's like, what? But he didn't give up, to his credit. And now Zazzy has the top 2 movies of the year so far. And with Marvel setting the bar pretty low for superhero content, Superman is shaping up to be a pretty safe bet, even if it doesn't hit a billy. And you know what? It doesn't need to hit a billy. As I've said before, it just kind of really needs to match Matt Reeves' The Batman. And I think as long as it has a 7 in front of its worldwide total, I think that will be very good. Anything less than that, I think, will not be great. But it would still be better probably than Marvel's movies this year. And now Zazzy just revived a hot franchise, allowing Warner Brothers to flex its horror muscles, reminding Tinseltown that they are a force to be reckoned with in the genre. Everybody's always talking about Jason Blum, and of course that's understandable. Jason Blum is a machine who's very good at self-promotion. He put himself on frickin' Shark Tank. Brilliant! But Warner Brothers has a very long history with horror. In fact, Walter Hamada did so well there, then he got booted over to DC, where, speaking of horror movies, the DC curse took him out. So, looks like Zazzy, speaking of executives, can stop interviewing for a replacement for DeLuca and Abdi. Although, on that note, something else that was reported when Zazzy first relocated from New York City to Hollywood was that he was a bit of a rube, and that agents and other executives were fleecing him. But it seems that he's smartened up and he's taken a firmer grip of the wheel. For instance, he's now starting to look heavily over the shoulder of James Gunn when it comes to DC. And I don't, the jury's still out on, whether or not that's a good idea. I mean, all this success he's having right now was put into motion a while back. It takes a while. It doesn't take as long as it seems to for some people to pivot, but pivoting is not immediate either. I do think it's good for Zazzy to be savvy. And I'm glad to see that happening. Remember, Hollywood is supposed to be a balance of creative and business. And while producers are supposed to be right in the middle, but when it comes to studio executives, they are responsible for the business side of that equation. Also, somewhat reminiscent of Washington, this reminds me of what's going on in Washington, taking a chainsaw to your organization not only doesn't work, but it makes people scared and angry. However, if you reshape your organization with nuance and an eye on public opinion, you'd be surprised at not only what you can accomplish, but what you can get away with. So here's Final Destination with a 5 in front of it. A 5! Oh my gosh. What another fantastic headline for Warner Brothers. This is the 4th biggest opening of the year, and it's top 15, not top 10, but top 15 when it comes to horror movie openings of all time. Oh my goodness, this is a better opening than Alien Romulus, an Alien movie. Although, of course, Alien had, Alien, I don't know. I don't know. The Alien movies before that weren't that bad. It's really amazing that Final Destination did this well. This is a bigger opening as well than any Scream movie, another comedic horror franchise. Actually, Final Destination and Scream have a lot in common, as you're about to find out. But this is also right up there with the Conjuring franchise's biggest debut, The Nun, also a franchise from Warner Brothers. And this debut has come out of nowhere because no Final Destination movie has come even close to this opening for the 6th entry. It's like, Final Destination doesn't perform like this. Now it does. And that's because of nostalgia. So yes, the last Final Destination movie came out in 2011, 14 years ago, but it's been running since the early 2000s. And it's very interesting to see Hollywood shift from 80s nostalgia to the 90s and 2000s. For instance, look at the success Disney is having celebrating the 30th anniversary of a Goofy movie. Things that even weren't that popular back in the 90s, they've grown fan bases over the years, and you're seeing them blow up like they never have before. It's really fascinating to watch. And it's not like Hollywood is milking the nostalgia craze or running into the ground or any of those negative ways to describe it, because people love Final Destination Bloodlines. And it is very unusual, by the way, for a horror film to get a B+. Although not that unusual when it comes to the popular franchises, because this is the 4th B+ for the Final Destination franchise, and Scream has also earned a number of B+, while the main Conjuring movies score even better, which shows why these franchises are able to stick around for so long. Final Destination Bloodlines is from little-known directing duo Zap Lipovsky and Adam Stein. We'll see if Warner Brothers can keep them in-house for another Final Destination movie, or whatever they'd like to do, as long as they don't go to another studio, which will surely try to lure them away with the promise of either fixing up another franchise, or again, if Lipovsky and Stein have a script somewhere they've been dying to do, now's the time to send it out. That's what you save that script for. You pay your dues, and then you cash in on the capital. It's the system because it works. But speaking of Scream, Final Destination Bloodlines is co-written by Guy Busick, who has co-written all of the last few Scream movies and is the sole writer of the upcoming entry. And we still don't know who he is or how to say his name. Get on that PR guy. And then, of course, John Watts, a main producer here. It can be tough for talent, as we've seen many times at this point, in front of and behind the camera at Marvel, once they leave or take a break. And Watts, that's why Kevin Feige's like, it all comes back to me. Well, I don't know. They're having trouble over at Marvel, which we're going to discuss in a moment. But Watts has also been having trouble. He's been having a hard time getting his footing. So this is a much-needed, decisive win. Inarguable. He did a great job, and it will help him to secure his next project, whatever that might be. I'm sure he has a couple of irons in the fire, but he has not committed to anything just yet. I bet he does in the next week or so. Now, how does this bode for Scream 7, right? Even under the shadow of how things went down with Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega, neither of which is in the next film, despite being very popular with fans. Some of you, we had an argument over as to whether or not Neve Campbell was still popular, and I think she's been hit a little bit by this Barrera situation in particular. Some of you, though, the Scream faithful, were like, don't you dare say that about Neve Campbell. You got very upset. I hope there are enough of you to prop up those box office numbers for Scream 7. And you better believe that every development executive in Hollywood is wondering, do we have a horror franchise that we could revive? I mean, look at these sexy numbers. But actually, they have been trying, and it has not been going well. They've, in fact, made a mess of several franchises over the past few years. You're like, wow, that's awful. But you know what? Enough time in Hollywood, in the Hollywood timetable, enough time has passed that maybe they can try a couple of these again, especially have a really good hook and they can really make it seem fresh and exciting. I think the comedy aspect was a big part. It's not, the Conjuring movies aren't funny. Although James Wan is, he sometimes can add something funny. Why do you think Scream, Final Destination, and The Conjuring have such strong audience scores? What are they doing right that other franchises are doing wrong? It's interesting to me. I particularly like to hear from those of you who are horror aficionados. But also, on that note, if you're a horror fan, what horror franchises would you like to see Hollywood try to bring back? As for Thunderbolts, yeah, it is not looking good. In fact, it's looking really bad. Oh my gosh. 3 weeks out, it's lagging behind. I couldn't believe this when I looked it up. It's lagging behind domestically Quantumania, Shang-Chi, Cap 4, and Black Widow, which was available on Disney Plus at the same time. And it's only tracking ahead of Eternals. Ouch! Oh my gosh. It's like, wow. Not only is the film struggling overseas, it continues to struggle overseas. And so that means almost for sure now, it's going to end up in the 400 million range, for sure. And it probably won't even hit its break-even point at the rate that it's going. But this is particularly bad. I think it's going to be really hard to reach 200 million domestic at this point. I mean, that is just, even I'll tell you how bad that is. Captain America 4 managed to reach 200 million domestic. But what makes this even worse is that Thunderbolts has excellent critic and audience scores. The Marvel faithful love it. Where are the ticket sales then? Are there less Marvel faithful maybe? Oh my gosh. What's to blame if it's not the quality of the film? Again, these are your choices. And of course, you can offer up any more that you think I'm not listing here. Superhero fatigue. I know a lot of you don't think it's real, but what's going on here? Disney Plus, that's definitely a factor. Disney's overall image with the general public, that for sure is a factor. You have a number of people actively rooting against Disney and not only going out of their way not to support Disney content, but sometimes going out of their way to support the content that's competitive with Disney. Also, social media, where key sequences and the best sequences in Thunderbolts were uploaded to social media platforms the day it opened overseas, which was a day or two before it hit the domestic market. Meaning, and that's, so a lot of you, as I've mentioned before, a number of you said that you didn't have to see Thunderbolts in theaters because you were able to watch most of it in bits and pieces on social media, and you felt that you saw the movie. Meanwhile, I'm sure one or two people did, but for the most part, nobody would dare upload a scene from Sinners because they have too much respect for the film and the filmmaker. So yes, I think Disney is dealing, a good way to put it, is a genuine lack of respect for their brand. Speaking of Sinners, it is about $100 million ahead of Thunderbolts domestic and still going strong. It just got back the best IMAX screens in the country for this week, and it's holding much stronger than Thunderbolts, while it's in its 5th weekend and Thunderbolts is just in its 3rd. Sinners is way past its break-even point, and it's embarrassing that Ryan Coogler, who works with the MCU, has basically delivered a much better Blade movie than Marvel ever could, unless Ryan Coogler was the one who made it. And Blade at this point continues to not only be a huge embarrassment for Marvel, but it's become a running gag. Embarrassment. That is a great way to describe 2025 for Disney so far. Because they're not just having a Marvel problem. This is a studio-wide issue, even into the Fox area. Because it used to be, remember I told you, if the general public for the most part, the one movie a month crowd saw a movie a month, it was a Disney movie. But now, this year, their movies none of them are hitting. It's really bad. Can Lilo and Stitch turn things around? Yes, Hollywood is hoping for a record-breaking Memorial Day weekend with Lilo and Stitch and Mission Impossible Final Reckoning. But will these two movies truly deliver? The plot thickens. They could even overperform. We don't know. So this is what's happening so far. Mission Impossible is tracking at anywhere from 72 to 88 for the 4-day, which would be the best opening for the franchise yet. Again, Mission Impossible never hit a billy. Not that girl at the party, but still, she gets around. So as I said, that would be the best opening for the franchise yet. But then, what's with this Rotten Tomatoes score? My goodness, every recent Mission Impossible movie has scored in the 90s on Rotten Tomatoes. And yet here's the latest one about to slip out of the 80s. Is Mission Impossible Final Reckoning review-proof, as Tom Cruise is as popular as ever? He single-handedly saved the movie industry, except for his own movies, it's starting to seem. Because he was pretty popular coming off of Top Gun Maverick, but Dead Reckoning, which, by the way, was a fabulous movie, still fizzled at the box office. Although Mission Impossible Final Reckoning did secure a release date in China. My non-spoiler review for Mission Impossible is up right now. Find out why, after I saw the movie, I can see why the Rotten Tomatoes score is slipping, but why I still think you should see it in theaters. So be sure to subscribe so that you can catch my Lilo and Stitch review later this week, my spoiler review for Mission Impossible, and of course to come back next Sunday to see how they both actually ended up doing at the box office. So as for Lilo and Stitch, the initial reactions at yesterday's premiere are excellent, although social media reactions these days are always quite good. Let's see what the Rotten Tomatoes score actually is when the review embargo lifts on Tuesday. For the 4-day, Lilo and Stitch is expected to open between 110 and 130. Surprisingly, that's actually lower than the 3-day openings for Inside Out 2 and Moana 2, which both ended up getting to $1 billion. However, Zootopia opened at just 75 and also managed to get to $1 billion. By the way, Zootopia made most of its money overseas, and I think that there's a real possibility that Lilo and Stitch will enjoy that same global popularity. I think you might see a similar split in terms of domestic and overseas box office for Lilo and Stitch as well. I think it just translates really well to being dubbed. I think it's going to play very well globally. But how big of a window does Lilo and Stitch have? Zootopia opened at the beginning of March, so it had, spring break's a little competitive, but it's not as competitive as summer, where Lilo and Stitch finds itself. Although Aladdin also ended up getting to $1 billion, and that also was a Memorial Day release. But for Lilo and Stitch this summer, just 1 week later, there's Karate Kid Legends, although the reviews for that so far seem to not be so great. Just 3 weeks later, How to Train Your Dragon live action, also dreamed up, by the way, by Chris Sanders. A lot of similarities between Stitch and Toothless. And then Disney's own Elio the week after that from Pixar. I still think Lilo and Stitch can hit $1 billion, but I think we need to see what the Rotten Tomatoes score and the opening weekend box office actually turn out to be. As for the rest of the top 10, hopefully this is the end of the weekend's acting career, because if anyone gives him financing for another movie or show, they deserve the heavy losses they surely will suffer, because he clearly doesn't know what he's doing. I mean, he's like an auteur in these projects, and apparently he fails in every single category, right? Every hat that he wears looks stupid on him when it comes to movies, and because you're supposed to wear a lot of hats. That's the joke I'm making, and none of these hats fit. He should go. Remember how great it was when he? Some of you might disagree, but remember what was so great when he was the halftime show at the Super Bowl? He's a long way from those days. And what's with Jenna Ortega? Is this is how she's spending her Wednesday capital? Maybe she's pulling a Robert Pattinson, who got it from Leonardo DiCaprio, and that's you want to break the image of yourself as a commercial star. But this only works if the quirky movies you make are well reviewed. Jenna Ortega, you're doing it wrong. I understand the vision, but you need someone else better to help you execute it. What do you think of the career choices that Ortega is making? I think a lot of you really are very supportive of her backing out of Scream, but from a business perspective, I wonder, can Wednesday hold up her career by itself? You're supposed to have a franchise to kind of be the spine of your career, and then you can make mistakes in other places. Pattinson has Batman now. And Wednesday season 2 is coming up. We'll see if it's as popular as season 1. Minecraft continues to do well in theaters despite just hitting digital. By the way, as I mentioned the other day, Jason Momoa, basically $2 billion movies, both for Warner Brothers, which is why they love him so much, with the first Aquaman and now Minecraft. That's incredible. Of all the actors who can get to the $1 billion club, who'd have thought? Well, I believe it after seeing Minecraft. He was so great there. But it's so funny that Jason Momoa ends up being one of them. When I used to say he looked like he was a fan who won a contest. I think he's finally truly arrived in Hollywood. I think, I just cannot say enough good things about Jason Momoa after Minecraft. He's a producer there too. I loved him so much in this movie. Jack Black did a great job, but to me, Jason Momoa was the heart of that film. So The Accountant, also holding well. Kudos to Amazon, by the way, for waiting to put The Accountant 2 on digital. And on that note, Sinners. They heard everybody's complaints because, it was rumored that it was going to be on digital this coming week. Pushed back. Now it looks like it won't hit digital until June 3rd to give it room to really continue to thrive in theaters. Excellent. Is AMC going to get its wish? Are longer theatrical runs going to make a comeback? How would you feel about that? Because I know some of you are very much enjoying short theatrical runs. And it's worth noting that A24's Friendship, which continues to expand slowly, continues to post impressive numbers. Can A24 grow this into a comedy hit? Did any of you see it yet? Is it that good? And with these numbers, for those of you who haven't seen it yet, is your interest getting piqued? It will continue to expand this coming weekend. Over on streaming, starting with Nielsen, per usual, we're taking a look here at the first full week for The Last of Us Season 2 with Episode 1. Well, here's the problem with HBO Sunday night shows. That's, as we've discussed before, the tail end, the very last hours of Nielsen's window for its charts each week. So, that's why with Rare, it would be almost impossible sometimes the numbers are pretty low, but for a new show to chart in the last few hours of the week, of the week window. So here, this is true. This is actually the first week for The Last of Us Season 2 on Nielsen. And it's doing pretty good, at least out of the gate. But I think what's really going to be What's interesting is what happens after episode 2. What will be the ratings for episode 3? Episode 2, I suspect, will have pretty strong ratings. But you know what? You might have noticed that, well, they did for the first, I think it was just the first episode, HBO released the numbers, the viewership numbers, how it was doing. And they did that for The White Lotus throughout season 3. Every week they would say how the numbers were doing, but they've stopped doing it for The Last of Us season 2. So I'm real curious to see what those numbers look like when they, now that they're starting to show up on Nielsen. Are you still watching The Last of Us season 2? How has it affected your viewership? Some of you might be waiting to binge, and that might be like a last-minute reprieval for the season to some degree. All right, this was a very good week for Netflix. Black Mirror still going strong, 7 seasons out. And wow, look at how much Hulu is on here as well. I don't think Hulu gets enough credit. This is developing into a really strong streaming service. And as I said the other day, I really feel they should move the Marvel and Star Wars shows over to Hulu, where they would have more creative freedom and wouldn't be as reined in by the restrictions of the Disney brand. I think Hulu is genuinely functioning as a successful streaming service, whereas Disney Plus really seems to be more of a babysitting service, as we've said before, and maybe a nostalgia portal, which is interesting to me. How do you feel about Disney Plus and Hulu? Do you subscribe to both, one or the other, or neither? All right, then over on the originals chart, speaking of Disney Plus shows and, for Marvel and Star Wars, even though this was the week of the season finale for Daredevil Born Again, it still was unable to get onto, forget the overall chart, still, it has never appeared on the originals chart, not even with a binge bump. And remember, Disney Plus episodes drop on a Tuesday. So that's the beginning of the window of the Nielsen chart. So it had so much space here for people to watch all the episodes now that they were all available. And they didn't. And also look how low the bar is. Mobland, I told you that was a hit for Tom Hardy. It's number 10 with just 4 measly episodes and 385 million minutes. Daredevil Born Again with 9 episodes couldn't top that. All right, now speaking of a binge bump, The Pitt's enjoying one because it wrapped the week before with 15 episodes. But here it is, a week later, not only on this chart still, but freaking number 5, as word of mouth has clearly been very strong. And, the audience continues to grow even once the show ended. I'm very excited to see how The Pitt does for awards season, the upcoming awards season this year. I think there's a chance it might be this year's Shogun. I think it could really dominate the drama category. Although Adolescence is still in the limited series, right? Oh, it's looking good for The Pitt. Then with movies, this was the week of Easter, and you can see that Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ, which was available on Netflix, did quite well. I always watch the 10 Commandments every year for Easter, and this year I also decided to watch The Passion of the Christ. And I gotta say, I still prefer the 10 Commandments as my Easter tradition. But with how angry everyone is these days, I can see why people gravitated towards The Passion of the Christ. I chose to watch it. I don't know, it hit different these days. It is it's 2 very different views of, I think, religion. Cecil B. DeMille and Mel Gibson's. But everybody was watching The Passion of the Christ, so I was like, oh, okay, I love a good party. So I thought I'd give it a whirl. But I don't think that it's something I'm going to watch every year for Easter like I do the 10 Commandments. But why isn't the 10 Commandments up here? That's because it's not available to stream anywhere. But it's a Paramount movie. Why isn't it on Paramount Plus? Maybe Disney has some kind of deal wrapping up all the rights because they broadcast it every year on ABC. Although this year they chose to broadcast it a week early, I believe for Passover instead of the weekend of Easter. I continue to be frustrated with how poorly classic movies are spotlighted and even made available on all these streaming services. Wasn't that supposed to be the point? Also, I think there need to be 2 categories for classic movies now because I'm getting kind of annoyed. It's like Disney Plus and Hulu combined into one. I'm trying to go through classic movies because I'm in the mood for a classic film, and I'm like, what's Ferris Bueller doing in here? 80s movies, are those classics now? And if they are, again, we need different categories. I think they need to do a couple of decades, group them by a couple of decades together. Because would some people consider this Angelina Jolie 2002 rom-com, which is doing surprisingly well now that it's hit Netflix, is that a classic? I mean, it's getting ridiculous. What do you think? Oh, by the way, look, everyone was catching up on The First Accountant as the sequel hit theaters. Over on Netflix, things continue to be a little slow at the moment. They don't have any huge breakout hits right now, but they're still chugging along. With movies, Vince Vaughn, despite some of the recent headlines he's made, he still managed, well, he was the only one who programmed Mother's Day. And, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with Vince Vaughn's career. I'm curious. Is he a future Hollywood ambassador? We'll see what happens with him. But he still has a soft number one with Nona's. While with shows, not only is the Four Seasons still number one, but it just got a season 2 renewal, even though it has much lower viewership numbers than The Residents. What is happening here? I mean, I'm not against I don't know if I'd watch another season of the Four Seasons. It was a very good binge, but it was a little bit too sad. But anyway, The Residents is, in my opinion, a far superior show. Was it too many episodes for The Residents? It did seem to go on for quite some time. But I watched the whole thing. I loved it. But the only thing I can be thinking is that maybe the completion rate wasn't good, even though the overall viewership numbers were high. But that's fine. Just greenlight a second season with less episodes. I mean, come on, work with us here. I really would be sad if The Residents didn't come back. Then, over on digital with Apple TV's charts, a Minecraft movie is dominating here as well. That movie just can't lose. But thankfully, Warfare is still holding on. I love that movie. Bundles also continue to do very well for Apple, with fans celebrating Final Destination and also getting ready for Mission Impossible 8. Hopefully that's a good sign. And don't worry, while it's not included in that bundle, Mission Impossible 7 is also high up at number 11. You would think that would be the most watched because that's the first half of the story you're about to see. But they're doing a very bad job. I just reviewed the movie. You, in fact, don't have to do any homework for Mission Impossible 8, as the first hour of the film will catch you up just fine. And while they didn't do great in theaters, at least Captain America 4 and Snow White are managing to do steady business on digital. Because while Disney might be struggling, they are holding on with a death grip to their windows. As in, it takes a very long time for their movies to go from theaters to digital, and then from digital to Disney Plus, which seems to be helping them. Look, these movies are doing well, or solidly. But then again, it seems a lot of people are willing to wait Disney out. They're like, take as long as you want. I'm not budging. So when do you watch Disney content these days? In theaters? On digital? Disney Plus? Maybe a couple of those. Or maybe never. As for this coming weekend, yes, it's a 4-day holiday here in the United States, Memorial Day. And Hollywood is hoping for that record-breaking weekend, the best ever, with Lilo and Stitch and Mission Impossible Final Reckoning. Oh, it seems the weather, at least in the Northeast, isn't going to be very good for the holiday weekend, which will certainly help movies. Also, Angel Studios is doing a special event with The Last Rodeo in select theaters. On digital, on Tuesday, this is very interesting. Apple TV, they're going to offer up their original film Wolves for purchase to anyone. You don't have to be subscribed to Apple TV for just $20. As I told you recently, because we've been talking about John Watts and stuff like that, the end of Wolves is not great, but the rest of the movie, like the majority of it, is really, really good, and I would say certainly worth $20. But for half that amount of money, you could subscribe to Apple TV for an entire month, and you would get that movie, Wolves, plus all the other amazing content on the service. Why are so few people willing to subscribe to Apple TV? It's one of the cheapest services these days, and it has such good content. All right, The Legend of Ochi is also hitting digital. As for streaming movies, on Friday, Netflix has a new Fear Street movie, Prom Queen, and a documentary on the Air Force elite unit, Thunderbirds. Well, Apple TV, speaking of Apple TV, they have a star-studded action-adventure film, Fountain of Youth. Then finally with shows, Prime Video drops the entire season of Motorheads on Tuesday. Hulu starts season 2 of 9 Perfect Strangers on Wednesday. Well, on Thursday, this is also very interesting, Margot Robbie is getting her Ryan Murphy on as she is producing this show for Netflix, Sirens, which has a really good cast. It's Julianne Moore, Megan Fahey, whatever, from White Lotus season 2 and Drop, and then also Millie Alcock. Wow, why doesn't Netflix advertise this stuff? And Prime Video has the Earnhardt 4-part documentary. Then on Friday, HBO has their own documentary, a 2-parter, focusing on Pee Wee Herman. And Netflix has the final season of Big Mouth. And that's this week's Movie Math. What have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? And do you think Warner Brothers can keep this momentum going? And do you think Disney has a hope of turning things around? Share those thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.